adoption. I have no idea why this was done, or where my brother might be, but I have always assumed that he was adopted at the same time as me. I only started to suspect his existence when I was entering my teens. By chance I came across a passage in a book, an adventure story, that described the way in which many pairs of twins are linked by an inexplicable, apparently psychic contact. Even when separated by hundreds of miles or living in different countries, such twins will share feelings of pain, surprise, happiness, depression, one twin sending to the other and vice versa. Reading this was one of those moments in life when suddenly a lot of things become clear. All my life, as long as I can remember, I have had the feeling that someone else is sharing my life. As a child, with nothing to go on apart from the actual experience, I thought little of it and assumed everyone else had the same feelings. As I grew older and I realized none of my friends was going through the same thing, it became a mystery. Reading the book, therefore, came as a great relief, as it seemed to explain everything. I had a twin somewhere. The feeling of rapport is in some ways vague, a sense of being cared for, or even watched over. But in others it is much more specific. The general feeling is of a constant background, while more direct messages come only occasionally. These are acute and precise, even though the actual communication is invariably non-verbal. Once or twice, when I have been drunk, for example, I have felt my brother's consternation growing in me, a fear that I might come to some harm. On one of these occasions, when I was leaving a party late at night and was about to drive myself home, the flash of concern that reached me was so powerful, I felt myself sobering up. I tried describing this at the time to the friends I was with, but they joked it away. Even so, I drove home inexplicably sober that night. In turn, I have sometimes sensed my brother in pain, or frightened, or threatened in some way, and have been able to send feelings of calm or sympathy or reassurance towards him. It is a psychic mechanism I can use without understanding it. No one to my knowledge has ever satisfactorily explained it, even though it is common and well documented. There is in my case, however, an extra mystery. Not only have I never been able to trace my brother, as far as records are concerned, I never had a brother of any kind, let alone a twin. I do have intermittent memories of my life before adoption, although I was only 3 when that happened, and I can't remember my brother at all. Dad and Mom knew nothing about it. They've told me that when they adopted me, there was no suggestion of my having a brother. As an adoptee, you have certain legal rights. The most important of these is protection from your natural parents. They cannot contact you by any legal means. Another right is that when you reach adulthood, you're able to ask about some of the circumstances surrounding your adoption. You can find out the names of your natural parents, for instance, and the address of the court of law where the adoption was made, and therefore where relevant records can be examined. I followed all this up soon after my 18th birthday, anxious to find out what I could about my brother. The adoption agency referred me to Ealing County Court, where the papers were kept, and here I discovered that I had been put up for adoption by my father, whose name was Clive Alexander Borden. My mother's name was Diana Ruth Borden, née Ellington, but she had died soon after I was born. I assumed that the adoption happened because of her death, but in fact I was not adopted for more than 2 years after she died, during which period my father brought me up by himself. My own original name was Nicholas Julius Borden. There was nothing about any other child, adopted or otherwise. I later checked birth records at St. Catherine's House in London, but these confirmed I was the Bordens' only child. Even so, my psychic contacts with my twin remained through all this and have continued ever since. The book had been published in the USA by Dover Publications and was a handsome, well-made paperback. The cover painting depicted a dinner-jacketed stage magician pointing his hands expressively towards a wooden cabinet from which a young lady was emerging. She was wearing a dazzling smile, and a costume which, for the period, was probably considered saucy. Under the author's name was printed, "Edited and annotated by Lord Calderdale." At the bottom of the cover, in bold white lettering, was the blurb, "The famous oath-protected Book of Secrets." A longer and much more descriptive blurb on the back cover went into greater detail. Originally published as a strictly limited edition in 1905 in London, this book was sold only to professional magicians who were prepared to swear an oath of secrecy about its contents. First edition copies are now exceedingly rare and virtually impossible for general readers to obtain. Made publicly available for the first time, this new edition is completely unabridged and contains all the original illustrations, as well as the notes and supplementary text provided by Britain's Earl of Calderdale, a noted contemporary amateur of magic. The author is Alfred Borden, inventor of the legendary illusion, the New Transported Man. Borden, whose stage name was Le Professeur de la Magie, was in the first decade of this century the leading stage illusionist. Encouraged in his early years by John Henry Anderson and as a protégé of Neville Maskelyne's, Borden was a contemporary of Houdini, David Devant, Chung Ling Soo, and Boitier de Colta. He was based in London, England, but frequently toured the United States and Europe. While not strictly speaking an instruction manual, this book, with its broad understanding of magical methods, will give both laymen and professionals startling insights into the mind of one of the greatest magicians who ever lived. It was amusing to discover that one of my ancestors had been a magician, but I had no special interest in the subject. I happened to find some kinds of conjuring tedious, card tricks especially, but many others too. The illusions you sometimes see on television are impressive, but I have never felt curious about how the effects are in fact achieved. I remember someone once saying that the trouble with magic was that the more a magician protects his secrets, the more banal they turn out to be. Alfred Borden's book contained a long section on card tricks, and another described tricks with cigarettes and coins. Explanatory drawings and instructions accompanied each one. At the back of the book was a chapter about stage illusions, with many illustrations of cabinets with hidden compartments, boxes with false bottoms, tables with lifting devices concealed behind curtains, and other apparatus. I glanced through some of these pages. The first half of the book was not illustrated, but consisted of a long account of the author's life and outlook on magic. It began with the following words. I write in the year 1901. My name, my real name, is Alfred Borden. The story of my life is the story of the secrets by which I have lived my life. They are described in this narrative for the first and last time. This is the only extant copy. I was born in 1856, on the 8th day of the month of May, in the coastal town of Hastings. I was a healthy, vigorous child. My father was a tradesman of that borough, a master wheelwright and cooper. Our house... I briefly imagined the writer of this book settling down to begin his memoir. For no exact reason, I visualized him as a tall, dark-haired man, stern-faced and bearded, slightly hunched, wearing narrow reading glasses, working in a pool of light thrown by a solitary lamp placed next to his elbow. I imagined the rest of the household in a deferential silence, leaving the master in peace while he wrote. The reality was no doubt different, but stereotypes of our forebears are difficult to throw off. I wondered what relation Alfred Borden would be to me. If the line of descent was direct, in other words, if he wasn't a cousin or an uncle, then he would be my great or great-great-grandfather. If he was born in 1856, he would have been in his middle 40s when he wrote the book. It seemed likely he was therefore not my father's father, but of an earlier generation. The introduction was written in much the same style as the main text, with several long explanations about how the book came into being. The book appeared to be based on Borden's private notebook, not intended for publication. Calderdale had considerably expanded and clarified the narrative, and added the descriptions of most of the tricks. There was no extra biographical information.